guys, and welcome to the Staying Driven podcast. This is a podcast with you in mind. I'm so excited to be your host. My name is Steph Roach, and I'm here with my lovely husband, the original power tool himself, Ty Roach. What's up? I'm so excited about this. I think it's going to be awesome. We're going to have some really good conversations. Oh my God, I'm super nervous. Why am I so nervous?
You're always nervous.
I know, this is so fun. I think for a long time I've wanted to host a podcast, but I wasn't necessarily sure what direction that would go in. And it's been a really interesting 2 years because I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm actually truly accepting the fact that you can live in an interabled world. And what I mean by that is I live with a physical disability every day, and I interact with people with disabilities every day. And guess what? It's not so scary. And quite honestly, I'm very open about this in the book, but I was really scared to be associated with a lot of people with disabilities for a long time in my life. And for the last 2 years, I really started to be able to open my mind a little bit because the doors have opened. And you are a big, reason for that, because everything that happened in 2020, everybody was affected by, COVID and all of that. We closed down our gym. The original idea of our gym was to be able to have able-bodied athletes and adaptive athletes working out together. But when you said, why don't we just open it up to everybody? Once we had to shut down the gym and start this virtual experience of staying driven every day, it really opened virtual doors, believe it or not, to so many people that I would have never truly felt as comfortable interacting with, which I think is really cool. So I think this podcast is going to be just one big conversation about accepting yourself and being able to hear different perspectives and see life from different perspectives. So I think that's kind of why I wanted to start this podcast. Why do you think it's so important to you?
Well, it's the same points, but from an able-bodied perspective. Growing up, I had friends who their parents or loved ones used some form of accessibility device, but as I started my career in the fire department, you really realize how quickly, one change in life can result in you being the one using an accessibility device.
Yeah.
And it highlighted those things. We had a really nice guy that lived in the city, and he used to take his power chair and go to Publix like 5 miles away because it was the most accessible one for him. And it was a common thing. We'd have to go fish him out of the ditch. He was literally off the side of the sidewalk. But that's just a normal course of life that as an able-bodied person, you take for granted. You hop in the car and take a drive and get whatever you need and turn around and go home. I think this podcast, though, is something where it could allow us to expand on the awkward moments, the things like, as an able-bodied person, you want to help. We're always taught just as a human, we want to help.
Right.
And we're taught sometimes, that offering help, but unfortunately, sometimes people take it too far and just jump in and don't ask.
We've been there.
but oftentimes a lot of people think that they're doing the right thing. They don't know.
Yeah.
So this gives you the opportunity, I think it gives us the opportunity to kind of expand on that. And, not being afraid to ask the questions, not being afraid to self-advocate. And more importantly, understanding that the world is out there and you should most certainly go at it, enjoy it.
And I think we jumped kind of right into talking about staying driven. But for those listeners that don't know what staying driven is, from your perspective as an able-bodied person, how would you describe staying driven?
So while staying driven started out as kind of an extension of the gym, like you said, in 2020, what we found was basically the first week it happened, it was almost exclusively chair users.
Yeah.
It was cool.
I would say it was like 95% adaptive athletes.
And people from globally.
Yeah.
People from all over the world joined in. What I think staying driven does, though, more than offering fitness classes, is it offers a community. We often talk about, you know, the functional fitness community and how it has changed over time. And there's no way to you know, dance around it. It has. When it comes to that extension of community with staying driven, it's there, and it really makes a huge difference. I mean, everything from, I remember there was a member who hadn't gone through the whole driving process before.
Yeah.
And that's something where she had the access to be able to chat with everyone and get the insights from people who have lived it. It's really cool that, you know, there are members who are newly injured. There are members who have, you know, haven't known a life any different, like yourself.
Yeah.
And being able to make those connections for people is super important.
You know, I find what's so interesting about the whole concept too is there are people on our staff now that never once knew that they could be a coach. And we've been talking about this concept of who told you that for quite a long time now, of like, you know, we'll hear somebody say, oh, well, I can't do X, Y, and Z. And you and I will both look at each other and be like, who told them that? Like, where did that come from? Right? And so I think staying driven and not just, you know, taking credit on my end, but I think staying driven as a whole, the community aspect of being like, this is who we are. And yes, we might do fitness for 30 to 45 minutes. And then afterwards, we all kind of bounce ideas off of each other.
There's a 15-minute conversation that happens at either end of the class, absolutely.
I remember when we first started classes, you would be like, isn't it like lunchtime? And we would have conversation for like, you know, a half hour after class had already ended. And but it's been really fascinating to see how you take an idea of having a brick and mortar business and really turning it virtual, and how that's opened so many doors for people in the adaptive community. You know, I've never been around so many quads, paras, people that are hearing impaired, people that are visually impaired. You know, I've been around some of it most of my life just because that's the nature of being in this community, but like never on a daily basis. And now I couldn't picture really life any other way. I think this podcast, as it goes forward, I know that you're not going to be in every episode, but I think as it goes forward, he's so sad about it. You know, we're going to be able to share a different perspective of life as a whole. And I think when people look at us as a pair, they automatically just think relationship. But I think there's so much more to this conversation, whether it's, you know, talking about your perspective when, you know, somebody does put their hands on me without thinking about it. I remember when we went to an airport and some guy just thought he was helping, and he literally grabbed me, like my chair, and just started pushing me. And your first reaction was, whoa, don't do that, because that's, you know, equivalent to literally just grabbing somebody without their consent, you know. And I thought, you know, he thought he was trying to help.
Yeah, but it's an education problem.
Right.
And quite honestly, I think it's an education problem, not just a one-sided conversation on that. I think it's both. You know, a lot of the times, and from just being around it, a lot of people are not inclined to self-advocate and or articulate the fact like, hey, I appreciate it, but like, no, like that's not okay. And more importantly, like letting people know like why it's not okay. And if your hands are in a bad spot and you get pinched up on a chair or whatever, you know, you're holding that. And for a lot of people, you know, a simple cut or injury could mean a really bad time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's something that I think everyone kind of takes for granted, and where people want to help. I mean, I think we're all kind of inclined to want to help, but then there's also the conversation of, you know, if there's helping and then there's like forcing your agenda on someone.
Yeah.
And your wanting to help doesn't negate the fact that someone doesn't want to help. So sometimes, you know, the best conversation starter is hello. You know,
right.
Why not start there?
Or, you know, people always say, well, what do you say to her? Or what do you call her by her name? You know?
Hi, what's your name?
Right. And like, how can I help you? So I think having this podcast, having this platform, yes, this is day one. And we're kind of just jumping right into it, but I'm really excited to see how it grows, because just like staying driven, we had no idea what it was going to turn into. And, you know, now it's pretty incredible that we not only get to work with individual members, but we also get to work with really big groups that we probably never would have worked with on, you know, in what we call, like the normal before COVID life. But I think that at the end of the day, it just kind of gives you a different perspective. And the fact that you don't necessarily need to be the fittest, the fastest, the strongest. You just need to be willing to want to work hard. And I think one of the best examples of that has to be, working with athletes that are even laying in bed. And then all of a sudden, 3 months later, we see them sitting up in a chair doing fitness. Like, that's incredible. But I don't think people even know, and I don't think we give you enough credit to say that, like, you were really the brains behind it. And I find that to be so incredible because, yes, I do a lot of the day-to-day work, but you made me think outside my box. And I think that's important.
I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I do. I disagree with that. I'm not the brains behind anything. Look, I read a lot and I regurgitate a lot, and that's just my personality. Like, I enjoy learning.
Yeah.
When COVID happened and everything else happened, it's quite simply, you at that point you have to change lanes. You got to figure out what you're going to do. The reality was, the big picture for us was, the more we talked about it, who were the at-risk populations? Who were the people who were most concerned with what was going on? And it was something where our conversations spawned that. It was our collective mindset, our collective drive that put it together. This is not a Tyler's concept or anything like that. It's so far from.
No, I think, but I think too, it's important. Obviously, I know you don't love to take compliments or take credit, but at the same time, you need to understand that you were the person that motivated me to be like, I can think outside of the box. Because me, of all people, when I'm laser focused on something, like, that's it. And there's nothing else that can, like, either stop me from doing it, or if it ends up being a bad decision, I gotta learn the hard way, right? And
this whole podcast situation is a great example of this too, though, Steph. Like, the reality of life these days is that things have changed,
right?
And when it comes to the fact that you have had access to so many different resources throughout your life, while a lot of those things to you just kind of seem normal, for a lot of people it wasn't. And I mean, just even since we've met, I've been very fortunate to have experiences in a lot of those avenues and learn more about those things that I've never heard of. I mean, even working in the medical system, things that you never knew existed. So, I think that there's a point here where we're able to bring those resources to the surface. We're able to open people's eyes to, there's more than just when someone hands you a stack of paperwork and says, hey, your life has changed.
Right.
Or for that matter, growing up with, whatever, type of different ability you may have, someone just saying, no, just go to the sideline and we'll call you when we're ready. It's not life. You can change those things.
Yeah.
So there was never a point of, I don't think that there was ever a concept around the position of, doing things a different way. I think it was more just out of a point of necessity. The business, things changed, but more importantly, we were more concerned about the people and having that empathy for the people who were, all of a sudden life was changed. What were you going to do? It's easy for, an able-bodied person to go outside and go for a run or whatnot, or, whatever it may be. And some of our members could do that. But a lot of people that we knew, a lot of our friend group, they couldn't. So, no one knew what was happening.
Yeah. And I think too, like, one of the greatest things that have come out of it is the fact that we do have bigger conversations. Like, when we met a gentleman the other day, and he had just come out of, his rehab from his accident, and, he didn't know all the ins and outs of just literally life, and making sure that your tires were pumped up so that you're safely moving around in your chair. And, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a failure of the medical system. It's just the lack of knowledge in life.
Well, we talked
right?
about that though too. Remember, for the majority of the population, I think it's a fair assessment to say that they've probably never interacted with someone who ever had adaptive needs.
Right.
And for someone who, like, say for a chair user, for instance, a lot of people, unless you're an avid cyclist, you're not going to realize that, those tires are going to hold 120 pounds, 150 pounds.
Right.
And two, you're not going to really notice the difference. People changing bearings. I find that so hilarious. Like, people never do it, and they're just annihilated. You literally take a wheel apart, and the bearing, ejects its contents all over the place.
And then when you change it, and they're like, "Ooh, this is like wearing a new pair of shoes."
Exactly.
Well, I think too, looking further down the road, Ty and I have talked about we're going to do that as one of our podcasts and really talking people through how to do chair maintenance and make sure that even if you aren't the chair user, you might be able to help somebody, just like changing a tire. I don't necessarily know how to change a tire, but I know you do.
But at the same time, the knowledge to be able to walk someone through it.
Right. It's kind of like the concept, I think, of like CPR. I may never physically be fast enough to perform CPR on a person, but I am CPR certified, and I do know how to talk somebody through CPR.
That's a great analogy.
So technically, I could help save your life. So, before we go, I think one of the last questions that I have for you is, what do you hope people most get out of this podcast?
I would hope that people just take away a new interest in themselves. Regardless of your ability, regardless of where you're coming from, everyone has attributes and things that can contribute. And taking a new interest in yourself and taking yourself seriously may mean the difference between not just your day but someone else's. So sometimes our interaction, just our histories are things like that. One of us wouldn't have taken the first steps and taken the swing on it.
Swipe right.
No, but it's true, yeah. We wouldn't have taken the swipe right. There's a lot of things that wouldn't have happened for ourselves and for others, and I think that's super important.
Yeah. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm excited you were here for the first episode. I think it's going to be a fun journey. It's not going to be perfect. There might be some mistakes, but I know that we're going to have some incredible guests come join us. So thank you for joining me today for the first episode. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Bye.